Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
We are speaking with Loverboy's Mike Reno, of course, great Canadian artist, and as we say here in Montreal, bonjour, Mike. How are you?
Bonjour, Mitch. Comment ça va?
Ça va très, très bien. So much to talk about, but we are going to focus mostly here on the 40th anniversary of the first album, Loverboy. But of course, now we're in 2021, so we're actually in the 40th anniversary of Get Lucky. So we've got two great albums to talk about. But let me get started on the first one, because this one was sort of everything fell into place. From Bruce to Barbara to Bob to Mike. It was all these guys that came together. Talk to me a little bit about the Vancouver scene at that time and how lively it was, and were you guys all sticking together, and it just became this great scene that led to this first album?
Well, we came to Vancouver from Calgary to record and actually to get together with Bruce Allen, our manager, and we needed him to be in our team, and we knew it, so we kind of came out here. So we were a little bit fresh out here, but the music scene was fantastic. There was clubs everywhere. We were playing everywhere. We were writing songs. We were writing with different people. We had different people come in and rehearse with us. And I just remember it just clicking. Paul and I clicked right off the bat. So we just started writing these songs. I mean, who knew they were going to be around 40 years later? I mean, I didn't.
Yeah, I know. Can you imagine? So talk to me about how we got to this first album. Here it is, November of 1979. The Kiss Dynasty tour rolls into Vancouver Pacific Coliseum. You open up for them, and then 4 or 5 months later, you're recording this album that has been 5 times platinum. The Kid Is Hot Tonight, Turn Me Loose are as iconic as any song from the 80s. How did you go from being opening for Kiss to writing these songs? Were these songs that you've had sitting in a pile for 10, 20 years and you brushed them up, or how did this all come together?
Well, Paul and I were in bands. A lot of the guys were in other bands. Most of the guys were in other bands first. And so we had met and started writing fresh. Paul and I started writing fresh. Doug kicked in and he wrote a few songs with us. It was a real nice package. We didn't have a whole pile of songs kicking around. We had this many songs. We actually had the luxury, and this doesn't happen very often, of playing in nightclubs and seeing how people reacted to the songs, which really gave us a little bit of a heads up, because we could tell if we played a certain song and nobody even looked at you. You just kind of went, well, let's put that one off to the side. You come in with The Kid Is Hot Tonight, and all of a sudden everybody's looking at you. They're up on the dance floor. They're giving us the fist. And the same for Turn Me Loose, and anyway, and so on and on. It was just a wonderful way to try out new songs, and we had that luxury. We didn't have that luxury for the second album, other than the fact that we played so many concerts in 1980 that when we went in the studio in 81, we were just completely we were ready. We were rolling. We only took 3 days off from getting home from tour to going in the studio. So there's two different concepts. One was like we've been working real hard and trying them out in nightclubs, and one was we just went into the studio as soon as we finished tour. Yeah,
well, okay. So talk to me about that, because in this day and age, and I talk to many artists, they'll say, well, we don't want to try any of our songs live anymore because they'll end up on YouTube. And then, how important was that for you to actually have that live experience with the songs before you put them to the record, to sort of work out the parts and figure out, like you said, the crowd reaction? Is that something that we've lost in the social media age?
I think we have. Let me just remind our listening audience that when we came out, internet wasn't around. Nobody had cell phones. It wasn't even invented. And YouTube was just not even invented either. So there was none of that. You could actually play. We had lineups. Like when we did concerts, like we did a week in a nightclub. By the second night, just from word of mouth, no internet, no cell phones, word of mouth, there was a lineup the next day. So we knew we had something going on, and we were really enjoying that. So we could try out the songs, and if they liked them, then we knew they were going to probably be special songs. I didn't think they'd be around 40 years from now, once again, but I knew they'd be special.
It certainly turned out. Now, you mentioned before that the Vancouver scene was happening, and you moved out from Calgary. Was the Reputation something that you had been hearing about and said, okay, we need to get there? Because you look at Fraser, who ends up going off and doing stuff with Guns N' Roses. You look at Bob Rock, who goes off and does stuff with Motley Crue. Bruce, of course, who does everybody in the 80s. Marc LaFrance is hanging around the studios. Bruce, Bryan Adams, Jim Valens. What was it about Vancouver that just had this concentration of talent? And was there a moment in the Canadian scene where people from Toronto and Montreal and Calgary said, we got to go there?
You know what? People did come here.
Yeah.
I remember we were in the studio. We had lots of things. We had time to do stuff, and we had all kinds of things going for us. The next thing you know, we couldn't get any studio time. Why? Because Bon Jovi came to town. They wanted to record. Motley Crue came to town. They wanted to record. In the same place we recorded. I kind of took it as a compliment. Like, I think, people thought, if we could sound like that, let's go to Vancouver. We'll get that sound. And it's true to a lot, because Bob Rock became hugely famous. Mike Fraser used to be our tape guy. He'd put on the tape, and he'd make sure everything was great. And he was a second engineer, and he was in a learning stage at that time. Now he's recording and mixing AC/DC albums, you know what I mean? So these guys, we all came up the rung together. And you're right. On one side of the room, there'd be Bryan Adams or Trooper cutting a record. And next on the other side of the record, we'd be doing backup vocals on Motley Crue albums and stuff. And Marc LaFrance was in a band, and he was the top studio guy in town. He got the high voice. He could sing all the parts. So when we needed crowd vocals, a lot of us, there'd be 7 or 8 of us, get together around a microphone. We record this chant 10 times, and that would be like 100 people singing. And so that's kind of what we used to go from studio to studio helping bands out. It was a really fun time. I mean, I kind of miss that.
Yeah, I kind of do too. And it's funny because there's a shot that Mark sent me not too long ago, and it's him at a Motley Crue session, and you've got Jack Blades, Steven Tyler, Mark, Brian, and they're all singing background, and you're going, wait a minute, they're all singing background vocal? It's like, that's like the best of the 80s right there. How are they just singing on? Was that part of what you were doing too? Were you also going into the Bon Jovi sessions and the Aerosmith sessions and singing backgrounds as well?
Absolutely. Whoa, living on a prayer. You know what I mean? That was sung by about 8 or 10 people 10 times to get that sound. And if they called us in, we went down, did it. We did it as a favor for Bruce Fairbairn. And we do it for whoever. And people kind of said, you want some vocals? We're doing it on Wednesday. Drop by the studio. And it was just fun. I mean, you come in there's a pinball machine, everybody's sitting in the back lounge, and they're mixing in the other room, or they're recording, and it was just like alive. It was buzzing with energy.
Yeah, we've kind of lost that in the industry now, because now if Bon Jovi said, "Hey, come and sing on Living on a Prayer," you'd be like, "Well, you got to talk to my agent, and I don't do it for less than $3,000 a set." I mean, right? Have we lost that? Have we lost that camaraderie of rock?
Well, a lot of times, I'd have to say overall we have kind of lost that. It's just, this particular year or last year was kind of a grunty year all the way around. We're not supposed to be in a room with anybody other than family members, as you know. And so everything's changed right now. But overall, just in general, a lot of people are cutting records in their living room. I mean, they open up their laptop, they plug in a microphone system and sing over a bed track. I mean, they don't even go to the studios anymore. A lot of the studios are shut down because of that. And I miss that. I miss standing in a big room, pounding away with headphones on and sweat and a towel, and and then afterwards you'd go out for a beer. And I miss that, and yeah. I hope to do it again. I'd like to record Loverboy's next album the way we used to record, all of us in the room, playing away, sweating away,
Yeah.
and putting in our energies. That's what I want to do for the next album. I don't want to do it over the internet like some people do.
Well, yeah, the old send me an MP3 and I'll lay my vocal on it and send it back to you. So then that there is a chance for new music, because listen, I have seen Loverboy up and down the, you've opened, when was the last time I saw you? In Saint-Hyacinthe, Quebec I saw you, but you also opened up for, was it Journey? Yeah, you opened up for Journey for a while up here. But
yeah, we did a whole tour through America and Canada, North America.
That's right. But it's easy for you to just go play the hits and not be bothered. So are you at that point now where you sort of want to be bothered to make new music and get those creative juices and have the tug and pull with the band members of what's right and what's wrong? Because obviously you can just show up, play the hits, go home,
You know what's funny? I tell people this is the strangest thing, but we will spend a few months writing some new songs. Paul and I are writing some songs and recording right now. But what'll happen is we'll play them live, and nobody's ever heard of them because nobody really buys records anymore, and you can't really get it out there anyhow. So nobody hears the songs. So you play about 5 hits, and then you throw a couple new songs in, and everybody gives you the weird look and buggers off to the bathroom. It's like, okay, well, let's not do that tomorrow. And then so you just stop playing these new songs. I could write the best song I've ever written in my whole life, like the Hotel California of my life, and I don't think it would ever hit the radio because I fall into a genre called classic rock, and classic rock radio only plays stuff that's 25 years old. You know what I mean? We're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and all the other radio stations, they won't touch us with a 10-foot pole. I mean, yeah. I don't hear any new AC/DC on the radio. You hear all the old stuff. I don't hear any new Cheap Trick on the radio. You hear all the old stuff. I know all these people. I know they got new albums. I always get them and listen to them, and I love them. But that's me. It used to be you'd sell all these records, and then you could go on tour, and they'd all know the songs before you got to town. But that's not the case anymore.
I got to tell you, I agree wholeheartedly with that because I deal with a lot of the heritage acts, classic rock acts, whatever you want to call them, and they have great new albums. And you're right, the last Cheap Trick was great. The last, there's a band in England called Thunder, all great, and they can't get played. And I don't understand why the Hair Nations or the classic rock, just on a Sunday night, have 1 hour of here's what these bands are up to now, or just something. You're really stuck between a rock and a hard place. And by the way, just quick, since we're talking about singles, on January 18th, 1986, Loverboy's "This Could Be the Night" debuted at number 87 on Billboard's Hot 100. So there you go. Historic fact.
Somebody just sent me a Billboard clipping, and Loverboy's "Get Lucky." The album was number 3 on the Billboard charts. I went, oh my God. And you know who was below us was Foreigner and the Cars, all these bands we looked up to, and we somehow got in there, and I was just blown away. It's an old picture of a picture kind of thing, but it was great to have.
Oh, it's absolutely great. So you've mentioned Foreigner, you mentioned AC/DC, both produced by Robert Mutt Lang. We all love Mutt. You worked with him for the song Loving Every Minute of It. He was on fire back then. Was there any time where you and Mutt said, hey, you're going to produce one of our albums and you're going to work with us? I mean, in a sense, why was it limited to sort of that one song?
Really, he was just a songwriter in that one. He actually had a version of it recorded. And like I said, I know some of your people aren't going to believe this, but there was no internet back then. So what he did is he played it on the telephone. He held the telephone up to the speakers, and we recorded it on a little ghetto blaster. And then we sat and listened to it and learned the song the way he'd written it. And then I wished he was producing this, but he basically gave us the song arrangement that was perfect, and we just stuck pretty close to his arrangement. And that's, I wished, and I would have loved to work with. I still love to work with him. He's a genius, but he's hard to get. He's hard to get in the studio. He's a high demand.
Oh, but he's just absolutely brilliant. So let me go back to the first album, which we're talking about here. 40 years. You have Barbara Asman, who does the artwork. So you look at this team from Barbara, from you guys, from the production team, like we mentioned, Bruce and Bob, and you were all sort of rookies at the time. Talk to me a little bit about the artwork, and then she became something of a art expert or famous artist afterwards. What was that like? All of you sort of being green on this project, and then all your careers blowing up afterwards.
You know what? I didn't know anything about Barbara before, and I really haven't followed her since. But I'm glad you told me that, because I'm going to look her up. Here's what happened, and this is the beauty that has kind of gone away. But this is kind of the long arm of a record company. They have kind of access to all kinds of things that you didn't. We were a band out of Vancouver trying our best on a budget of $60,000 to cut a whole record, which is damn near impossible, by the way. But we did it anyways. So then the record company would have got somebody to come up with the album cover, which was fantastic. And you know that she took the words from one of our songs and she typed it onto a Polaroid, and that's what gave it that splashy look. But if you look at the first album, you'll see that if you look at the album cover, you'll see that it's got lyrics on it. Those are the lyrics from one of the songs on the album. I thought it was an ingenious thing to do. Plus, it's a self-picture of her sitting there, really skinny gal having a smoke. I thought, this is cool. People thought we were a punk band at first.
Wow, you know what? I knew that it was the words of Little Girl, and I knew the Polaroid story, but I did not know that was her. That's actually her on the cover.
That's her. She took a self-portrait, yeah.
Yeah, well, you see, I followed afterwards. She became part of the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts, and she's become the cutting-edge expert in the whole sort of Polaroid photography thing. She was, the avant-garde artist, and since then exposed everywhere. And it's just funny because, her first gig, basically, commercial gig, was your Loverboy cover. And it's like, wow, look at what
that
this...
is cool.
Yeah, so Loverboy, it launched your career. It certainly helped Bruce. It certainly helped Bob. It certainly helped Mike. It's like as Canadian as anything you could ever imagine. It's
and that gives me a warm feeling in my soul, really, that we all started together. I remember just to give you the example of how it started. Really, I used to come to the studio and I'd say to Mike, how did you get here so early? Because I heard he lived in Langley, which is, 60 miles out of town kind of thing. And he says, I've been sleeping under the board. It's nice and warm under there, under the mixing board. And you know what I mean? Because he was cleaning up and putting stuff away and getting mics set up and untangling cords, getting the tapes ready. So he was almost working constantly. So he started off as a second engineer, and he's gone right to the top. Now that makes me feel good. Bob's the same way, and they're all still very close to us, good friends.
Yeah.
I golf with Mike Fraser. Yeah, I mean, this is a great story, and actually that's the part that makes me love talking about it. It's like we all came up together.
Yeah, and in such a short period of time, again, like from the Kiss concert to 5-time platinum selling to here we are 40 years later. It's amazing. Let me ask you quickly about Paul Dean, because when you think of Canadian guitarists, we think Rick Emmett and Alec Lifeson, but there are two particularly that I find. Keith Scott with Bryan Adams and Paul Dean, who sometimes seem to be left out of the conversation, and yet both are absolutely essential to the sound of their bands. First of all, would you agree with that Keith and Paul are just beyond... they're just great guys. Talk to me about working with him and his guitar style and what he actually means to the sound.
Well, Paul was part of the production crew too. Not only did he write the songs and with me and we worked together on the music with the band, but he was producing some of the stuff too, or co-producing it with Bruce Fairbairn. And we worked with Bob Rock on a few other projects. Paul's really into the music. He has worked hard at his sound. He created a sound that he really loves. He builds his own guitars. He modifies all his amplifiers. He's constantly working at sound check to have a sound or get a different sound or change the sound. And the reason he's maybe doesn't get talked about much is because he doesn't really like to do the interviews. He would rather just be dinking around at soundcheck or down in his recording studio making music. He doesn't really want to be the guy doing the interviews. He will, but he doesn't do them very often.
Which is funny that you mentioned that, because my first two ever Loverboy interviews were with Paul. They were like, "Oh, Mike doesn't do interviews." So, okay.
It's funny. I you know what it is? When I used to work 5 days a week doing arena shows every night, I tried not to talk during the day. I had to sing for 2 hours. I had to be I tried to be careful. And then, as we, became more popular and stuff, people want to talk to me. It's like, when you think of the Rolling Stones, you want to talk to Mick, right? So that's basically the way it is. It's got nothing to do with who's smarter or who's better or who's more famous. It's just the fact that, and plus I know a lot of the stories. I was there for everything. I mean, I was there for it all. Huh? And Paul can tell you some, but what's funny is Paul will tell the same story differently.
Well, of course.
He's got different memories of it, and that's normal, I guess. But I will say something, and then Paul will say do the same kind of deal, and he'll go a whole different way with it. Like, I'll say I went out for sushi, and he'll say he was fixing his amplifiers and ended up talking to a guy who came over with the guitar, and they rebuilt it. And I'm saying we're down at the thing having a beer and some sushi. It's like two different. It's the same night, but two different stories.
Two different fractions of the same thing. Just real quick, before, when you said "Living on a Prayer," did you sing on the Bon Jovi album on "Slippery When Wet," and did you sing on the Motley Crue stuff and the Aerosmith stuff too? Or is that?
I probably did. It was all, we were singing everything. We sang everybody's stuff.
Oh, that's great.
And and internally, if they would help sing our stuff, if they were there, they'd come and sing "Loving Every Minute of It." There's a whole pile of people singing on that one too.
Wow. See, and when you talk to Bryan Adams, and they're like, "Well, Lou Gramm sang on my Cuts Like a Knife," and you're like, "What? How did that happen?" Going from the first album over to Get Lucky, you've had the success. The songs are doing well. It's well produced. What was the pressure like going into Get Lucky? Was the record company sort of breathing down your back, going, "Okay, we need another Turn Me Loose. We need another This Kid's House. We need another whatever," or was it mostly do what you do? How much pressure was that second album? Because it also, now 40 years. Exceptionally iconic, and of course the album cover. What was that period like after this first album comes out, going into the second one?
Well, we were on tour. I don't even remember. We wrote songs during sound check. We wrote songs in our rooms. We wrote songs in our tour bus. We would try things out at rehearsal, and then we had a little break. Paul came back he took a little trip, had a little vacation for like 5 days. He came back with the beginning of Working for the Weekend, which was completely different, but we changed it and made it the way it is today. And he would start songs, and him and I would finish them, and the band would get together, and we'd all add our parts and stuff. It was interesting. We didn't have time much. I tell people that, he goes, "That must have been great. You guys are like in your mid-20s, and and I go, you know what? We work so much that it's hard to remember. We never sat around and go, "This is great. We're doing really great." We never said that. We just kept working, and it's really weird. I think back now, and it's not like we missed anything. We were concentrating on what we were doing to the point where we didn't do anything but that.
Well, yeah, you worked. Well, here, and I'll start wrapping up with this, but. You look at the work, you look at the pressure, you look at the tours, whether it's Cheap Trick or ZZ Top or Bob Seger or whoever. You look at the album's success. You have managed to stay the band for these 40 years or 41 years. There's no Mike Reno solo album with 6 extra guys. There's not the Mike Reno band playing Loverboy's greatest hits. How did you manage to keep it together and not want to throw each other out of the window and not want to, I'm never talking to Paul again. How did you keep it together?
Well, Paul and I decided to take some time picking the band members out. We wanted to pick guys out to be in our band that would go the distance. And I think we pulled it off. And I can say that now. But at the beginning, we just wanted to be with these people. Not only were they great musicians, but they were also great human beings. And it's been a pleasure. And we respect each other. We love each other's talents. And we love to play together. We travel together. We play together. We're still doing it. And if it wasn't for this damn COVID, we would have done another 85 shows this year. We only did 20.
Yeah, and they've all been good. And I'll finish with this last question. What did Bruce Fairbairn mean to you and to your sound?
Bruce Fairbairn was kind of like, do you remember when you really looked up to your dad? Yeah. And he wasn't that much older than us, but he kind of treated us like we were his kids. And he made sure that we worked together and played nice. You know what I'm getting at? Played nice. Don't go all crazy up here. Just stick with what you're doing. And then he would work individually with the guys, and he would keep everybody's attitudes up. And he would say, let's do it again. You know how some producers come in and they change everything? Yep. He just recorded us the way we were. He let us play our instruments, and he played and he recorded. And then he would say, well, we don't need that part. We don't need that part, but that part and that part are excellent. So let's just focus on that, and we'll just drop that other part. That was kind of where he came in. So he let us play our own instruments and do our own thing. We were recorded naturally.
You see, that's great. And that's what I liked about his production because, you know, listen, I love Mutt Lange, and I think what he did with Hysteria and Foreigner 4, all great. But sometimes it seems to lack that organic feel. And then you listen to what he does with Permanent Vacation and Slippery When Wet and Loverboy, and you just go, you know what? He's just accentuating the band. He's letting the band be the star. And it's just like, yes, that's what I like. And that's why I loved everything he did. And what an incredible loss for music when he passed away. I'm just awful.
Oh, I know. But it was a terrible time. We couldn't believe what happened, and I still have a tough time. I miss him. He was a dear man. I loved him.
Yeah, he really was. And let's leave it on that. Rest in peace, Bruce. Yeah. Great guy. And Mike, thank you for calling in. And of course, the first Loverboy. And since Get Lucky is at its 40th anniversary, we'll have to do an interview later on this year and talk about that one in fuller detail.
You got it, Mitch. A real pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Merci, monsieur, as we say in Montreal. Bonsoir. Have a good night.
Bonsoir.
Cheers.